Welcome to our webinar. I'm Cheri Guntzviller Mason. I'll be showing you how to create custom PLC schematic symbols. GoEngineer has lots of webinars here for electrical on this specific set. This is our third in the series on PLCs. Let's go ahead and get started. With the PLCs, again, we're just continuing our journey here, and creating custom symbols is what people are looking for. So I want to show you some of the easiest ways to be able to get that information from your devices, from your data sheets, from your 3D models into your schematics. So the first thing, what do we need to consider? We need to identify what our symbol is going to look like. Is your PLC going to be broken up into multiple symbols? What kind of information are you looking for on that symbol? Do you have any drawings or data sheets to work with? And lastly, do you have a DWG or an existing symbol or even a SOLIDWORKS model or maybe even just a 3D model that you're wanting to use? We are going to be able to, in this webinar, I'm going to show you, even if you're not familiar with SOLIDWORKS, how to get that schematic symbol. So where do we start? Well, that's a great question. We can't identify what symbol we're going to look like until we've identified what manufacturer's part it is going to represent. So, does your part exist in the manufacturer's library? If no, we need to make one. Otherwise, we can say yes and continue on to the next step. We will go ahead with the no and make a part. What we are going to do, though, is go to the electrical content portal. Now, you will notice that with the electrical content portal, the software brings up your electrical content portal automatically on the browser. Now, if you don't have it, you may want to check your add-ins. Now, in any version of the software prior to 23, there is this add-in management that you can bring this up. And then you sort. If you've on subscription, you have access to the electrical content portal. Alan Bradley puts everything in their Rockwell area. So be very careful with this, and I'll show you why. Notice when I type in 1769, I am getting two part numbers that are the same, but one has an AB dot in front of it. You don't want necessarily your library to show that part number of AB. So instead, what you might need to do is download that part. Now that's what I'm doing here, is unarchiving this part into my software. And just by clicking the link for the part, you will be able to then download that part. You may need to modify it, which is what we're going to do. And so I'm going to look at this part in my library now of my manufacturers, because unarchiving has brought that in. Of course, I don't know really where it's at, so I do know that it's a 1769. So I'm going to go ahead and search for that 1769, and I might have to change some of my filters in order to find that part because it's just not showing up. So be very careful about that. You'll be able to change some of these classifications afterwards. So you can see now I've got an AB part and I've also got a 1769 part. I'm going to use the 1769 and let's look at some of these properties. We'll look at the circuits in a minute. But for right now, if we look at this part, the first thing I'm seeing is that the classification, the way it came under miscellaneous. I definitely don't want this. So I'm going to put it just under regular PLCs, so that way it's there and I don't have to go searching in the subclasses. I always put the part in a user library. I don't leave it as a no library. Secondly, this type can cause some issues, so I'm going to keep it as PLC. But when you're searching, things come up as base. Be careful about that. And then, of course, if I'm using this device, I'm wanting to have it show up as a mark of PLCs. Notice that the line diagram is already assigned and that there's a 2D footprint, but there's no 3D model or anything like that, but it does have a size. We'll look at the circuits. Now, I am going to go ahead and start typing in the physical address. Now, from the previous webinars, you will see how those numberings can be used. So we'll just finish that up here. And so now I've got a part to use. This part then is now how I'm going to base my symbol. Now we need to identify what that symbol is going to look like. Now, from me putting in all that information into the part, I saw that there were a lot of inputs and out. Do I have an idea of what this existing part's going to look like? No. If you do have a DWG or a DWG symbol you want to use, that's great. I'm going to say no, I don't. So what I'm going to do is I found from my electrical content portal a 3D model. So let's look at how this is being used. So I'm in SOLIDWORKS now, not SOLIDWORKS Electrical, just SOLIDWORKS. I am using a step file. I am not going to worry about the diagnostics. I'm just going to open up this SOLIDWORKS model. So if you're not familiar with SOLIDWORKS, that's fine. Just open up the model. Don't worry about feature recognition. You can hit the space bar to orientate it and hit File. And we are going to say, save this step file as a SOLIDWORKS part. What I am then going to do now, this, if you're using a step file, you definitely, for 3D electric, that is a different story. But for what we are doing here, we're going to make a drawing. So go to File and Make a Drawing. Simply select Drawing here. Now, here's the key. Do not display the sheet format. That will give you an empty background with no title block to worry about. Automatically, the views of your 3D model are going to be on the right. You drag one in. This is now what you have. Now, from here, all we need to do is simply go to File and Save As. Make sure to change the type to a DWG file. This will allow us to have a DWG in Schematic. So in Schematic now, I can simply do File and Open. So I can find that DWG file and I can open it. Notice in the tab in my drawing space here, I do have a DWG in the tab. If you need that, you can always go to your File Explorer and turn on File Extensions so that way you can tell what type of drawing you are working with, whether it's in Schematic or not, because of course this is not in Schematic. It is just a DWG dumb CAD. Now we need to figure out, okay, we know what this symbol looks like as far as the 3D model. What am I going to do? Am I going to represent it as one or multiple symbols? I'm going to use multiple symbols because my symbol, that manufacturer has a lot of connections. Let's go ahead and then utilize this. So what we're going to do is the first thing I'm going to look at is this DWG. If I highlight all of the entities that were brought in, I want you to notice the amount. 17,000 entities. That's terrible. We need to get rid of some of this additional detail in the symbol. We don't need it to be this extensive. So simply using your highlight and delete keys as well as your draw and modify, you can change text so that way you're not using a label. Here's what my drawing now looks like after I complete. I moved and put circles in. I put standard text in instead of some of those labels that they had. Makes it a whole lot easier to use. I'm going to go ahead and create a new, I'm going to say a test symbol at this point, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the graphics and bring it into this test symbol. So we'll go ahead and put it into a library. I'll go ahead and put in the description, but I'm not changing the drawing units, whatever the drawing units were. If it was an empty symbol, I'm going to use Imperial. Here is my symbol, just the graphics. I'm going to simply highlight it, right click and copy with an insertion point. That way I have control with where this cursor is, and I'm going to then left click just to place that position for that insertion point. Now on my new symbol, down by my origin, I like to place this symbol, so I'm going to place it here just by a right-click paste. And then I'm going to move that insertion point so it's near the top of the symbol. Now what I'm going to do is make sure that I save it, because obviously that needs to happen while you are working in DWGs. Let's clean out our graphics area just a little bit here. And I'm going to open up sheet number 4. Here I would like to go ahead now and use this symbol to get some ideas of what size this symbol actually looks like on the page. So we'll go ahead and just grab this symbol and place it on my schematic. It's a fairly small symbol, but for what I'm wanting to do, I think this is going to work out fairly well. I am just wanting this as a representation to be able to then draw some wires to see what this is going to look like. 16 wires here just by draw a single. That's looking pretty good. Let's draw some graphics on this just to see what this looks like. And I'm going to actually capitalize on using this graphics. I'm going to draw an ellipse, and I'm going to capture that first grouping of the terminals. So I'm going to make sure that I turn off my snap at the moment here just to draw this graphics and see what this looks like here. We'll grab the entire group, maybe adjust this a little bit more to grab the entire group. And now when I am looking at this, I can go ahead, and that looks pretty good. Let's draw a line like a leader line just to show the grouping down here in the bottom. We'll turn off the ortho and make a leader line. And what I'm going to do is drop that leader line right here, so that way what I can is I'm going to grab the rectangle now and just draw a rectangle around the grid point. The grid point is going to be where I am actually dropping my first connection point. Now what's nice is that even though I'm drawing graphics right now, I can copy this into my symbol. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy all of this, go into my symbol. I'm going to open the symbol back up. Right now it doesn't have any of that. I'm going to get rid of all this graphics. And I am simply going to come to my schematic sheet now and grab all the graphics. And this time I am going to use a copy with insertion and grab that center dot of that first connection point. So I'm going to turn my snap back on and grab that center. So that way when I go to my symbol here, I can go directly to that insertion point, and using snap, I can snap, and it's also on that insertion point. And get rid of the wires. But now all of that graphics is already there. We'll use the modify an array function here, and I am going to make 16 rows with 2 columns of this rectangle. So remember that you are working towards 0. So we're going to go, we know our snap spacing is at 1/4 of an inch. I am going to make this a negative 0.25 so that it's going down from where I have drawn that first rectangle. And then we'll set this column offset to 1/2 inch. Select the object of just that rectangle, and then hit enter and say OK. And it will then build your array with your connection points. Well, this is starting to come out to be pretty nice. I'm kind of liking this. Always make sure to save. All right, so now we need to finalize the symbol and make some connection points. Now, this gets a little bit more intricate. Let's just dive right into it. I'm going to go ahead and open up sheet number 5. And in my schematic tab, I am going to use the Insert PLC command, because I'm going to use a configuration to drop the symbols from the configuration down, and I'll show you why. So we're going to use that same exact part, and I'm doing this just so that I can make the symbol with the attributes later. So we'll grab that same L24ER part and just add it here. And then what I'm going to do is select which connections I am wanting. So we'll keep this as PLC. And I'll go ahead and add a description. Not quite sure if I'll use that, but over here now I'm going to select the configuration of 20 channels per page. I'm going to uncheck because I think I'm going to make 3 different symbols. One is with the power and these USB port and the additional piece connections there. The second one I think I'm going to use all as digital. So I'm going to go ahead and use the digital inputs here. And the next one is going to be digital outputs. Now I think I'm going to group those two together when I make my symbol. But this way I've got all of those inputs and outputs. I'm going to make another symbol here that's going to have all that analog. Well, as I bring my cursor over, I realize that that's way too big for a symbol, so I'm going to have to break it up into 2. So let's just deselect and drop those in. And then, of course, make sure that I've got the last of it. So here's my third symbol. So I'll have power, my digital, and then all of my analog. And those have all the attributes that I'm going to be wanting. But let's look at that power for a minute. I'm noticing one thing. This power, when I look at it, it has this really long text that's just going all over the page. I'm really not liking that. So I'm going to come over here and I am going to just highlight this symbol and look at that graphics, and it's kind of overlapping so I can't even tell. So I'm going to grab this piece and move it. All right, that's how it looks better. I think I'm going to keep the PLC1, the Rockwell, and the part number, but not that description. Let's go into our test symbol now. Oh, I am going to make this test symbol, and I'm going to, now that I've got the graphics done, now I'm going to make some test symbols. Now the reason I'm doing this is these symbols are going to be slightly different. So I've got the power, the digital inputs and outputs, and I've got the analog. The one thing that I am realizing is that you cannot easily make the symbol and then add circuits to it and then duplicate it after you've made those circuits. What ends up happening is that the symbol does not behave correctly once you start deleting circuits and trying to add new circuits. So I'm literally taking my graphics and leaving that as my original. And then I am making, just by copy and paste, making now a power symbol, a test symbol, and then making a test digital symbol, and then I will end up making an analog symbol. So at this point, let's just start with the power symbol. All right, so we'll go ahead and open this up. Now, from my schematic, that configuration, I picked those connections. Let's go ahead and now add this symbol to the library as a temporary symbol. And I'm going to call it temporary so that way I remember to delete it later. I'm not going to need it for much other than while I am making this schematic symbol. So we'll go ahead and just add temporary power here to it. And now we can open this symbol up because it will open up automatically. I can now see the circuitry. All right, I've got circuit 0 is power supply, circuit 1 is ground, and then I've got 3 auxiliary female pins. That's what my symbol needs. So let's go ahead to our test symbol then, and we are going to add those circuits. So again, power supply, ground, and 3 auxiliaries. Highlight the symbol name and simply say New Circuit by right-click. I'm going to add again that one power circuit, and I'm going to do these in order based off of how I want them laid out. So I've got the power, then I'm going to go ahead and add the ground, and again a new circuit, this time 3, because I want 3 auxiliary female pins. When I go ahead and say OK, there they are. Let's double check this symbol now. This is our temporary symbol. I'm noticing that the power supply has 2 connections and the rest of the circuits have 1. Highlight the circuit in your symbol and simply right-click and select Undefined. Hit the space bar and then position that new circuit. Now, here I am putting those 2 connections under power supply, and then I am placing the rest of the symbols or the rest of the connections for my symbol here. So now that I have these done, well, I really don't need the rest of this graphics. So I'll go ahead and just simply highlight it and delete it and use these. Now I realize that the ellipsis is not quite in the right spot. I'll probably clean that up later. But for right now, let's just look at what extra information. Well, this only has the P tags. There are no other attributes, but I do have the attributes that I do want to add to the PLC itself. So we'll go ahead and add by highlighting these symbols or these attributes. And yes, you can copy these just like you do any of your graphics. You can copy them from the one symbol to the other. So we'll grab these and just put them on our test symbol. Drop them up here at the top. And the first thing I'm going to notice is, oh, okay, well, they're orientated wrong. Well, let's just place them. And now what I'm going to do is use my modify, and I can simply rotate. Now, rotate will work for anything other than an image. So let's just go ahead and select them, and we'll grab a snap point and rotate them a little bit. That works wonderfully. Now, the one thing I'm noticing is I'm very anal. I like to make things center justified, so I'm highlighting all of these attributes and simply selecting mid and center, so that way I can put them centered on my symbol. That's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead now. Yeah, I think I'm good with that for right now. Yeah, I'm going to have to move that ellipse, but for right now, this is going to work. Maybe I'm not even going to use the ellipse for my power, so we'll have to think about that later. Let's just go ahead and save this, so you can always hit that disk up at the top to save. And now let's go to our schematic, and now I can simply, I think I'm going to leave this symbol for the moment, just to compare it, make sure I've got everything that I'm wanting here. We'll go ahead and just go up to our schematic tab, and let's say insert symbol. Let's find our test symbol for the power. Takes a minute here to bring that up. We'll go ahead to the title, type in test, grab our power symbol now, select it and place it on the page. I'm kind of liking the size of that. That really does work pretty good. All right, we will simply change this to PLC, make sure that our tag looks good. Manufacturer's part. Let's assign that manufacturer's part that we are using. Type in 69 here. And of course, notice it came in as base, so I will need to change that to all rather than because, of course, just like I had mentioned earlier, you might have it as PLC or somebody may classify it differently. So you do have to be careful with that. So we'll grab a part here and place it and say select. All right, so I can see that this is going to work out fairly well. I can see that the green is already there for signifying my circuitry. And I can see, well, I might have to do a little bit of modification just for where those P tags showed up compared to the connection point. But I'm kind of liking how this is starting to turn out. Let's take a look then at these inputs and outputs for our digital. We'll start with the input card. So we don't really need our schematic symbols anymore, so close all of these. And instead what I am going to do now is highlight my input symbol and make that into a temporary. So again, simply right click, add to library, change this to a temporary symbol. And now, well, I'm not going to worry about that. I'll go ahead and say OK. Now this symbol is a little bit more intricate, but it already has the layout of those connection points and all the attributes. So let's go ahead and open up our existing test symbol here for the inputs and outputs. And so now we're going to be able to utilize the circuits here. And no, you cannot copy the circuits or the connection points. It will not work well, but I can make them very quickly. So I can see that I need 16 digital inputs and then 2 miscellaneous PLCs. Those are the commons. You could make them power, but you want to have your manufacturer's part and your symbol match. So because this manufacturer's part is driving the symbol, we know that miscellaneous PLC is what they used here. So digital inputs, we've got 16 of those. And then we will go ahead and grab the miscellaneous as our second selection. And then we will go ahead and start dropping in our connection points. So drop in miscellaneous. All right, let's just double check something here, make sure, yeah, it is just those two, all of those circuits are just simple connections. We'll start from the top here, and we're going to go ahead and just select circuit 0. Oh, wait a minute, I gotta look at this. The PDF is showing me that it's not just dropping it in straight down the page. Look at how they are laying out the card. It looks like they drop at 8, so it's 0 through 7, and then it's COM 0, and then connection 8 is at the top on the second row, and then stops with COM 1 for the digital inputs. Oh, so I've got to make a little bit of a change here. So this is the perfect time to use that data sheet to make sure on how it's laid out. So we'll go ahead and start dropping in connection points here. And I'll jump forward just a little bit. We'll drop in a couple. So again, just dropping them in the center of those rectangles because I made them right on the graphics. So here is number 8. All right, let's just verify. Yep, it went to 8, and then it went to the comms, and now the next set of comms is for the digital output. So we're not going to worry about that, but I did notice that there is a no connection after these 2 comms. Notice here, COM 0, COM 1, and then no connection, no connection. All right, before I start the next card. Well, let's go ahead and drop in these 2. So the COM 0 is supposed to be on this side, on the left. And then the next one here is on the right. Well, let's go ahead and do the next set then. I'm noticing that the rectangles, I don't have enough. I can see here that I'm definitely not going to have enough from the PDF. Well, looks like what I'm going to have to do is simply come back into my symbol, and I'm going to just highlight these rectangles. And because they're on the grid, and I made them as an array, they're evenly spaced, so I can copy with an insertion point from this one here and just bring it down to the bottom one. And when I right-click and paste, I can drop it right onto that grid point, and the spacing is already adhered to. So that makes it kind of nice to be able to see that. All right. Let's go ahead and make a temporary symbol from the digital output, so that way we can verify how these circuits are working. Highlight everything here and make our temporary symbol. So once you get used to making some of this, it will then become a little bit more fluid for you because you're always doing kind of the same thing. So here, let's just double check that our connections are set up. It looks like we've got miscellaneous PLCs on the top and on the bottom. Now, why wouldn't I add just 4 miscellaneous PLCs all at the same time? Again, I'm trying to follow the same circuitry as my manufacturer. It is because you've got those differences that you truly are wanting to make sure that this is staying the same as what you have laid out from the manufacturer, so that way the symbol reacts correctly when it is laying out from circuit 0 all the way down through the end. And if you put all of the miscellaneous together and then by chance you don't have them matched the same as your manufacturer, COM1 could become COM0. And those are the types of things that become very difficult. So if you are at least handling this by doing the configuration of the symbol, you are able to then be able to control where those attributes are going and which circuits are which. So again, we know that these connections are going to be dropped in, skipping one space. We'll go ahead and start. I moved ahead just a little bit here to finish up and drop that next one. Now, we have all of this here. Let's look at the attributes that we have from our temporary symbols. Now, the attributes that we have from the temporary are, well, I better save that symbol. Remember to save the symbols. This is the one thing that I always have problems remembering. When you are in a DWG, your SQL is not capturing it. Let's go ahead and now get rid of the symbol. Let's see what this looks like just to start utilizing. I'm going to use a contextual menu here. So I'm going to go to my component browser and find PLC2. And we'll use PLC2 for the moment. So I'm going to say Insert Symbol and select the symbol that I just made. Let's see how it's working. All right, so we have a few things. Yep, I can see that the COM0 and COM1 is correct. The V1, V plus, and V minus are correct, so that's looking good. Let's go back in here now and now add some attributes. So from our temporary symbol, I can see that I'm looking at 3 attributes there for that first connection point, and then I have 2 more over here on the right. These are the description. And those are going to be from your inputs and outputs when you are working with those. The P tag I don't need. Again, modify and rotate these 2 attributes. I'm going to do a highlight and do a copy of the properties to apply it to the properties of these 2 attributes as well. So that way they're all the same size. And let's just move these over, and I'm going to group them just so that I can take them to the next symbol, our temporary symbol, or our test symbol, and bring them to that symbol to be able to utilize. So let's just copy those and open up our test symbol. And paste them. And here's what I'm noticing. Oh, I didn't make that column big enough. Well, let's just drop everything for now. We'll move those over so they're on the grid. Okay. Let's take this entire column. We already know that it's spaced correctly, and we're going to just push it over to the right further. Now that it's over to the right, making sure that we're still in line, now I can bring those attributes in. All right, we'll move these. Now I think what I'm going to do is drop them here. And then what I'm going to do is take these other 2 attributes, make sure to save, Let's go ahead and take these two attributes that are that description. I'm going to move those to where the wire would be on the when they come in to that connection. And then I'm going to take this channel address and the IO address and put those there. We'll change a little bit as far as the P tags, make those smaller. That looks pretty good. You can highlight all of them with a shift select or a control select, and you can change that dimension all at one time. Here, these are looking pretty good. I'm going to use this, well, I could use copy. We know how to use an array. Let's go back and use a modify and array to actually add this, and maybe we add it 20 times just down this one column. We won't worry about the other column just yet. And again, it's still that quarter inch spacing that's negative. We've already got our attributes selected, so we don't need to do that. Simply say OK. Now, yes, it is the same attribute number, even though it's 0, for all of them now. Here's the key. Highlight those next set of attributes. You can then right-click and say Modify Index, and you can then make it a 1. Now, this is based off of the connection point, which is the node. You are wanting to make sure that these are for the node. To be able to see, this is how we did 16 for this one. And we can continue down and do all the others. I'm going to get rid of those. And then you can, of course, start doing things like adding that text. Let's do some text here of NC for no connection. And I'm going to specify the height later. So people seem to forget that. And that allows my cursor to be able to control the size. That looks good, but I do, of course, want to make that justified in the center. All right, now that we've got that, let's just save your symbol. Now do a symbol update. Here's what this is starting to look like. Now I have continued and actually changed all those indexes. I'm going to show you what my symbol now, let's go ahead and apply this to the PLC that actually has a manufacturer. Let's see what that looks like. You're going to see the IO now show up on this. Now, of course, the IO numbering is definitely not showing up as you would expect. In the other webinars, I do show you how to make that work. I'm not going to go through that here. Here is the symbol that I end up with. Now, I'm just going to simply highlight my symbol, find this new symbol that I've made. I've made some more modifications to it. So this is what my symbol now looks like. I added some rectangles, changed those ellipses so that it showed the grouping for what side. And then I go ahead and I did the same thing for the analog. So these are the types of symbols that you can make just by going through this process. I did some additional massaging of that graphics afterwards, but these symbols literally now are available for anyone that has the software in your facility can use those symbols. I like these symbols. They look very professional. Let's go ahead and delete these symbols. Let's look at what I created here for my last power symbol. That power symbol, I got rid of the ellipses, just cleaned it up a little bit, made it a little larger, so that way it showed a little bit better. Here's what that looks like now. I also changed the cross-reference text to actually be green. I did add some more, just that one extra attribute to show those different pieces. This is what we have now for the symbols. And it really didn't take that much for us to actually make that. So at this point, make sure that you save those symbols. Make sure that you are doing that right-click copy with insertion point, and you can have symbols just like I do. All right. I am opening this up to any questions that you may have. Oh, there are a couple of questions here. So let's go ahead, and I'm getting a question here about where are those attributes literally at, because if I wanted to add more attributes, those attributes, if you were to look at a specific symbol, and we'll just open that symbol back up again, those attributes can be found. It takes a minute here for this symbol to open back up again. When you are insert attribute here, over in the upper left-hand corner, you will see this insert attribute function. This is your list of all those attributes. You will find under the circuits, when you go to the specific circuits, yes, it does call out those circuits, but if you go down to PLCs, you'll see more. So here are those additional pieces like that channel address, or maybe that mnemonic that you might want to be adding. So these are the types of things that if you find it one time, then what you can do is you can use that modify index to be able to get that information onto your symbol. Thanks. Great question. I have another question here. The electrical content portal. How did I get that 3D model? Well, let me show you that aspect. So what I did is I went to Google, and you can type in electrical content portal. You will find that SOLIDWORKS will bring in a 3D Passport login for the electrical content portal. You will create your own if you do not have one. I already have one here, so I will log that in. This acts a little bit differently than it does in your schematic. So if I were to now go to Rockwell, you will now be able to, let me just go directly to it. My software is taking a moment to actually get lined up. So when I am looking for that part, you have this references tab. So don't forget that you have content, but you have references. With the references, what you can then do is type in that 1769 part, L24, and search for it. Now it said that it did not find it. I actually went directly to the Allen Bradley website to find that part. But let's go ahead and see if we have anything. All right, 1769 modular. Notice I have a CAD download. When I select this CAD download, I can select 3D or 2D. You can select the electrical 3D, and it will bring in a 3D model for you. This is how you can get your 3D model for your specifics that you are looking for. Great questions. Thank you so much. All right, so that being the case, if you are looking for more information, you can get a mentoring session. You can reach out to us either through your GoEngineer customer portal. You can request a mentoring session if you'd like more on how this works. You can also ask your account manager for more information. Where they can help you get a mentoring session up. And you can also contact us directly through our GoEngineer.com website. So thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed the webinar and you got some information out of it. Have a great day.